Alright folks, once again, Guglop here, coming at you with a brief recording of my most recent BFD run. It's going to be pretty off the cuff. We're not going to be really focusing on anything. This is unscripted. I'm just going to chat while I go through everything. I didn't manage to get the trash here before Baron himself, but I am just going to talk over each of the sections, sped up by roughly 2 times speed. A couple things to keep in mind. For each of these sections, I'm going to do a brief overview of the boss itself to give everyone who is new to Warden Tanking the opportunity to know exactly what's going on. Just to go over the Baron's mechanics really quick. I know we already killed them, but I just want to make sure I can talk about it after the fact, because it is a really fast kill once you do have the general gist of the mechanics down. First and foremost, as a Shaman, when you're tanking this fight, you do not need a shield. You should be dual wielding. I know that might sound counterintuitive to some of you, but he doesn't do any physical damage, so there's no reason to have a shield. In fact, you having 2 weapons will just give you the highest amount of overall additional damage to make sure you can clear that boss just a little bit faster. Beyond that, Raid just wants to make sure you watch out when you get that depth charge debuff so you can jump out of the way, and just pay attention to the bubble beam like I didn't, because if you get hit by that, it does knock you back. Next we have the turtle, Mr. Gamura. For Gamura here, I'm doing the same thing. I do also dual wield this boss, as he doesn't typically do enough physical damage unless you are eating that triple bite with multiple stacks of Sunder on him. So you can relatively safely dual wield on this boss. It's worth just making sure you do have an off tank or a hunter pet that can go ahead and take control of that. Otherwise, you just make sure while you're going through, you're pumping out as much additional spell damage on him as possible, because that is where you're going to get most of your damage. So ensuring you keep up that searing totem, as well as making sure you're hitting your shocks on cooldown. If you're using water shield and dual wield and way of earth on this, you should have plenty of mana to make sure you're keeping up on everything. As you can see here, I'm not struggling too bad for mana, and by the time I do go we do kill him. Now, for any of the trash packs, it might again seem like it's one of those situations where it feels odd to not have a shield up. But honestly, if you're just tab targeting and going through things, you're going to maintain threat on most of these mobs. Further, they really don't hit hard in general, so anyone from your raid can kind of just keep them up and tank them just fine. I'd say honestly, even your healers and cloth wearers are safe to take a few hits. It's really not worth stressing out about too much. They're really not that difficult. So in a lot of these situations, we're also doing staggered drinking periods where one of our healers is stopping to drink while the other one continues to heal while we do these pulls. Hell, even just a moment here, you'll see that I drink just to be ready for the fight itself prior to us going into it. You're also going to see multiple times I just check our logs while we're going through, just to see the time it took us to kill each of these bosses while we're going through or in small periods of downtime. Do just to make sure if there's any misses, I like to be aware of it. So here we do Lady S. So Lady S is interesting. Technically, there's a whole series of mechanics you could be doing if you tank her ad, but we don't even do that. We just put a hunter pet on the ad, and we ignore it the entire time, and then we just burn her down. Ironically, in this fight, she did so little damage to me that it didn't even count me as a tank. So ended up just getting a normal enhancement ranking for this one. I'd like to give you more tips on exactly how you should go through that fight, but it's really nothing. Kind of not anything worth thinking about or looking at. As long as you are just attacking her and killing her, you can kind of kill her in about 30 to 40 seconds. Barring, you have the appropriate buffs and everything on your raid members. And then you just end up going through the new trash packs here. Not really going to have any commentary to add for these, so we'll just go ahead and come back once we get to the next boss. Alright, and now we have Galahast. It's worth keeping in mind for Galahast is one of those fights where, again, he doesn't deal any physical damage, so you can safely ignore having to use a shield again. So you want to make sure you're dual wielding on him. And then on phase 3, after he goes through each of his transitions, you can pop a Shadow Pot just to make sure you survive any of that extra damage you are taking because of the debuff, but you don't really need to. It's worth keeping in mind as well, if you just tank him in this position here, only people that have to move during his March of the Murlocs is your casters. You're going to have to kill him 3 times, just to make sure you're maintaining your Searing Totem, any of your other buffs while you're going through it. But if you stand right here, you don't have to do the mechanic. The only people that have to do it are your casters. You can safely just ignore it. The Murlocs do not come up in this area. I believe you have to have at least 3 people that are out in the water. Otherwise, he doesn't interact well. But otherwise, just kill him. So you are going to see here, for this fight, this is the first one where I do swap my runes. For Lorgles Jet, you do want to have shield specialization, and you want to have Molten Blast backup. I'm going to do that for a couple reasons. First and foremost, having shield specialization with the adds that spawn during the Gauntlet here allows you to maintain an appropriate amount of mana. Otherwise, you would struggle in this fight with just Water Shield, but you can actually keep all of the Murlocs alive here. So you'll see that I actually instruct my raid to not kill any of the Murlocs. Those Murlocs stay around. Their whole purpose is to give me mana throughout the fight, so that I can just spam my shocks on the boss and make sure that I'm hitting Molten Blast pretty much on cooldown when necessary. It's going to do a couple things for you. It's mostly just going to make sure you have the appropriate damage on the boss to help burn him down as quickly as possible, but it's just safe to make sure you have that additional mana in case you do need it. For Jet, you're not going to worry about the meatball. You're going to ignore the Magma Totem, you're going to ignore the Wind Fury Totem because he himself doesn't hit very hard, and you're only going to kill that Lightning Totem. You'll notice here, we kill him in just a few seconds here. I don't even have the exact time frame for the fight offhand, but I think it was just over a minute. And then if you were a good smart boy, you'd make sure after the fight you switch your runes back to dual wield, because you're not going to need shield specialization again for the rest of the dungeon. I think that I click it here, and it starts doing my swap over, but the macro itself broke and did not switch over to dual wield. So I actually griefed myself a little bit on Jet here, or rather on Kelris. I noticed this before Akumai, and I'm able to switch it back over to make sure it's correct. And we're able to correct that and go from there. Otherwise, we just clear the trash up to Kelris, and then I'll be back with that. Alright, now we're back with Kelris. Kelris has a couple interesting mechanics. Main things you want to keep in mind first are this underground section. So every however many seconds, someone gets put underground. You have complete control over who goes underground. It's always the two closest individuals that have not already gone down. So we stagger it so that I always go down first with one of my DPS. It allows us just to make sure during all of the remaining phases I'm able to tank the boss and focus from there. And then next, if you just want to make sure you go in, it's the closest people. So my next two DPS, they stand directly on the boss. You saw me spamming a macro before. It's where I was instructing the individuals who have to go under to go under. And then during phase 2, you can kind of cheat phase 2. By cheat, I mean there's a couple ways you can work with the mechanic. First, everybody pops Shadow Protection Potion, makes it insanely easy. And then if you are the closest individual to the boss and everybody else is maximum range, so mostly your melee, if they're attacking from max range, he'll actually only attack you as the tank. You can control exactly who he's mind blasting. Everyone else will be totally fine, good to go. After Kelris, got to do the candles. We were talking about loot, so we kind of just took the candles slow and one at a time. We could have sped up this run even further. But we were just complaining about the fact that every time we've done this run, we have just only gotten caster leather. So my resto shaman, I'm a nerd here, is stacked, but everyone else is waiting to get their set pieces. Now, on the run to Akumai, again, I'm able to catch here that my rune didn't swap over properly, and I complain in voice comms here about how it didn't switch over. So I got to make sure I get better about that, potentially set up a weak aura, but that's not really important here. For Akumai, again, you can dual wield. He doesn't do a lot of physical damage. Most of his damage is either shadow or nature based, and he will do about 30% of his total damage to you in physical damage, but he spends a good amount of the time just running around and throwing up his individual mechanic. Now, it's either the poison or the shadow, and you can work with that pretty effectively to not have to worry about a shield. So I too tank this. This is with one of my warriors that does have the epic crafted chest, just on the chance that we can get that debuff on Akumai to increase our raid damage. We do the typical shifts at 3 debuffs for the green and 2 for the purple. In this phase, since we kill Akumai so quickly, once we get to phase 2, where he is just doing those shadow adds, we actually don't do any damage to them. We just hold them, they attack whomever, and we just go ahead and burn the boss. All in all, this came down to about a 28-minute run. Super fun. Glad we went through it all. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to throw out there, you can leave in the comments, or you can reach out to me on Crusader Strike, Guglop. I'm happy to make fun of you or answer any questions.
This